welcome back, everybody, to Two Goalies, One Mic, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from at 6 different Western New York locations, a location in Rochester, and, of course, Ohio, if you ever happen to be out that way. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a Fatty Beer. Let them know Two Goalies, One Mic sent you. Joining us for episode 199, falling one short of a monumental occasion, is one of my favorite guests. To talk about the 2025 Sabres draft class, Mr. Chris Peters from FloHockey. Welcome back, sir. It has been a minute, but does it slow down for you now? How much time do you get to really unwind and relax, or is it right back into the grind?
Yeah, I get. Well, thanks for having me again, Duane. I get about 3 weeks. The World Junior Summer Showcase is. I believe I'll be leaving for that on July 27th, and I will be there through August 2nd. So it'll be, or August 3rd. So yeah, so it'll be right back into the fire. So you don't get a lot of downtime when you do the prospect stuff. It's just too much happens. I'll probably try to take another break maybe in August, but yeah, I mean, just lots of moving parts all the time. So I'll get a vacation in here in a couple of weeks. I usually have like a 3-week window that I give my wife every year that, this is where we're gonna get our vacation in, and then we just get right back to it after that.
One other thing I noticed too, this is not off topic, but I've had you on a lot. I've had Greg Wyshynski on, and just other kind of pro level and prospect level analysts. The one thing I've noticed, you all have books and bookcases in the background, and I don't. I think I'm doing something wrong. I don't know. All of you all have books and bookcases.
I think it's because many of us came up in media during the early 2010s when everybody was saying you need to have some sort of background for videos, when everybody was pivoting to video about 10 years ago. I know for a fact that the reason that I have this bookcase right here is because when I worked for CBS Sports, we were just starting to do a lot more video with our writers. And so I was mandated to buy a bookcase or some shelving in order. And so I just kept it there. It's been there ever since. It has not moved from that position right where it is. And it's just, it's kind of, it's some set dressing more than anything. I have read the books on there, and it's mostly hockey books behind me, and there's a few other sports books, but yeah, it was basically, it's been there for probably 10 or more years since I was there.
Since with CBS. I do the show in the spare bedroom here, and I just threw a bunch of stuff on a wall behind me. I'm like, there it is. There's the background. Not just the white wall anymore.
I think it looks great.
Sabres memorabilia just thrown up. Threw up all over my wall. So, but no, thanks again for coming on with us, Chris. Again, I know we tried to get you on beforehand, and obviously that's just your busiest time of the year, the weeks leading into the draft. But the Sabres just about made all of their picks. I think a lot of people expected them to potentially trade their first round pick, which they did not. I think for that 2 years now, a lot of people kind of expected them to possibly deal with that pick, and they didn't. Your overall thoughts on this, not the Sabre draft class though, but just the overall thoughts on this draft class, and how hard was it for you to cover it? How the most exciting player, how locked on in were you on your mock drafts? Just overall the experience of this past year's draft for you.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a tough year to evaluate, more just because I think that the quality of player really dropped off as you went through. I thought it was a very shallow draft. Not a lot of players to be super excited about. I do think that, the players that were available within the top 15, as per usual, are the most interesting and exciting players. And then, the further down you get, the less excited you get about kind of where it is. And I thought that happened sooner in this class than in most classes. I think that you look at most of the end of the first round, you say, it looks kind of like a second round, looks kind of like there's, the second round maybe started about 10 picks earlier this year. So, that's the kind of thing that happens. And really, in all honesty, once you get into the 20s of the first round, the value between those players and the guys that go early in the second round is minuscule typically. So I think that was abundantly clear this time around. That group of players is probably a lot wider than it normally would be. But in terms of just being dialed in, I think we're always, trying to get the best handle that we can on this. I felt good about, things. The mock draft, the very last mock draft that I do every year is the one I try to get as close to what we would see. And it was fine until about pick 5, because there was a lot of, confusion about what Nashville ultimately was going to do. There was talk about Porter Martone. There was talk about Brady Martin. Even James Higgins was kind of in that mix, and they ended up picking Brady Martin. So, there were some hits still along the way. I do think that there was a reason to believe that Ratty Murtka was going to go to the Sabres at number 9 as the best available right shot defenseman. So there's a lot of different things that happened there. I think in terms of the excitement of the draft and the different things, like the decentralized thing just ruined it.
It was so stupid.
It was bad. And, and they tried to make the most of it. It really wasn't the NHL's fault. It's the teams, and every general manager that wants it to continue, I think, just hates the game of hockey, probably, because the draft is one of the best things the NHL does. I understand it completely inconveniences them from a business standpoint, but I don't care. I mean, really, it's just, you can't take one of the best things the league does and do what they did to it. And hopefully everybody agrees going into next season.
Especially how awesome last year's was in Vegas. I think, for the most part, especially fans who attended it. Like I attended the draft when it was here in Buffalo. I mean, after Buffalo picked, that was the Alex Nylander draft.
Yeah.
Buffalo went really off. I would say off the board, but they really, 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 really needed defensemen, and they went with Alex Nylander. After they picked, it was kind of like a big board fest. I never really felt bored in that first round watching that draft, even from home. I know people who went and they said it was a blast, and then to go from that to this decentralized garbage, it was. If you want to consider yourself one of the top 4 main sports and you want to be in that conversation, do you think the NFL ever has these, their executives and their GMs ever have these conversations about how, it's an inconvenience to have us all out? Like, no, they're not, because they're a league to be taken seriously. If you want to be taken seriously, these are the things you need. The draft should be a layup event that people want to tune in and watch. Not whatever the hell that was. That was awful.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned before, the Sabres did end up making all their picks. They did not have a second-round pick. I believe it was the one they dealt to Ottawa, maybe, in the Norris trade. But a guy, as you mentioned before, that was talked about for quite some time, Radim Marica, the right-handed defenseman from Seattle. Not a guy that you think is going to play in the NHL next year, but definitely an incredible skater, can move the puck up the ice, incredible size. I like the comparisons I've seen, at least locally, are guys like Tyler Myers. Which, I mean, I guess if you're getting Tyler Myers out of Radim Marica, a guy is still playing in the NHL. He's been a very serviceable defenseman throughout his career. Won a Calder. I mean, did fans here in Buffalo wish his career went down a different path and it worked out? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm happy. I'm fine with it if that's what Radim Marica is. Maybe he's not overly physical, but I just hope that maybe once developed, he plays like he's 6'6".
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you have to hope. He said an interesting thing at the combine this year that, I buy to a certain extent, but you have to figure it out better than he did this year. And it's basically, one of the reasons that he doesn't play as physically as he probably should is because when he was younger, he was always bigger than everybody. Anytime he would hit anybody, he'd get a penalty. And that does happen with older players. They kind of almost get it penalized out of them because they want to play. They don't want to sit in the penalty box the whole time. So they lose some of that edge. He's got to find that. That is a real issue with him. It's not like he needs to get stronger too, so that he's harder to play against, which we expect would happen. I mean, he is still pretty young, for the draft class. He just turned 18, just a month ago, and he's still such a raw talent. And I think once you get him into a development system, he is a player that is going to take a little while longer. Like, it could be it could even be 2 years before I think he's ready to be a guy. Like, he might have to play in the AHL for a bit, which I think, with the way things are going in Rochester right now, I think is totally warranted. And that'll be interesting to kind of see where he ends up in that regard. But the thing is that when you have a 6'6" right shot defenseman that skates the way that he does, the foundation of skill and the foundation of what he's able to build on is really exciting. And so with that, he does move pucks well. I think he made the right call moving from the Czech to the WHL during the season this year to get more minutes, to play in more situations, to get more puck touches, to do all those things. There were elements of his under 18 Worlds that I really liked. There were elements of his under 18 Worlds that I thought was a little scary in terms of just overall, sometimes the consistency of competitiveness, the physicality, those kinds of things. Needed to see more from him there. But again, you take that chance and you say, okay, well, this is a 6'6" right shot defenseman. Very difficult to find, especially when they have the mobility of a Radim Mrtka. So I think he's a really good player. I think that he is a really good, project. But I do think that both him and the next pick, Bedkowski, those are two guys you got to be patient with, because bigger players do take a bit longer in terms of their overall development and coordination, their athleticism, all those different things. Take your time with them, give them a chance, and then see it. Because if there's one thing the Sabres have done repeatedly, and they make this mistake so often, is they rush guys. And as they rush guys, it screws them up. And why do players get better when they leave? It's probably because they started poorly or too early. And then when they were put in a different situation, they got better. So that's kind of the thing that they're going to have to really be disciplined about, especially with Mrtka, because this is a guy that, if you let him marinate properly, has a chance to be a really, really good defenseman.
I couldn't agree with you more. I want to make 2 points on what you said, about the size and hitting and how he's kind of shy. Actually, when I coached, I only coached, high school hockey after, I kind of hung up the skates competitively. We had a kid, and I'll give him a quick shout out. This kid, Nick Yelich, who, he wasn't the greatest skater, and that's not a shot at him. He's a football player, phenomenal lacrosse player, but just like pure size alone, Nick was just a force. And he was always bigger than everybody. And when he would like put it this way, players would try and hit him, and they would just bounce off him. And then you'd hear parents screaming, and then up goes the ref's hand. And he just like, what did you want me to do? Like he would get penalties when he had the puck. He'd be carrying the puck up, somebody would try to hit him, and they'd bounce off him and fall over. And he wouldn't get up, and then all of a sudden the ref almost felt like compelled. I gotta call a penalty for what? Like, for him being smaller than him? So to a certain extent, I kind of get it, because Nick sometimes shied away from the physical side of his game. And don't get me wrong, he had a good shot. He was good at possessing the puck. All he had to do was lower the shoulder, and nobody could touch him. Absolute dog when he had the puck. But sometimes he had to shy away from that physical side because everybody was so much smaller than him, and he would constantly be in the penalty box. Sometimes he averaged like 3 or 4 penalties a game, and half the time it wasn't on him. And then to your other point about being patient, I couldn't agree with you more. You look at Zach Benson. Now, Zach Benson has worked out to be a pretty good player for Buffalo so far, and there's been a conversation of whether he should have went back to juniors. Was he ready for the NHL? I don't think you can honestly question his ability to play in the NHL. I think the kid is I'll use this word again, a dog. Like, he's been, he's quickly turned into a fan favorite in Buffalo. But if they did have the option to, after the draft, to send him to the AHL, I think that's where he probably would have ended up. because obviously he was dominating. I know he was the linemate with Matthew Savoy in the WHL, but like I guess in Buffalo's mind, they desperately needed a player for fans to be excited about, and B, just a guy who could fit in. And he had a phenomenal preseason. He had a great camp, and maybe he might have earned that roster spot over certain other players. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that maybe it couldn't have benefited him a little bit to go back to junior, or again, if they had the option to send him to the AHL, because he's 18. He's 18. Yeah. Like he's on the smaller side. Let him grow. Let him get bigger. Let him there was nothing wrong with that. Put it that way. Like you wouldn't have been hindering his development had he gone back. And I'm not trying to say that needed to happen. Obviously, it's worked out to an extent here in the NHL. But it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And I agree, patience can be a virtue for this franchise. And with the current state that they're in, where, again, we just went through 48 hours of just nonsense. They haven't gone out and signed the – not that, players are over, knocking on Buffalo's door to come play here. But, we're having the same conversations this year that we've had 2 years in a row, hoping that Jack Quinn has a bounce back year. He stays healthy. Terry Pagula's comments during the season last year when they were in the middle of a 13-game losing streak. The answer's in the room. I mean, is it? We don't really know. And I think this year they're probably banking on the former first-round picks they have made in the past in Isaac Rosén, Noah Ostlund, Yuri Kulik, and then a guy I'm kind of excited about, Consta Helenius, who had a really good year in Rochester. I think that probably is, are the players that Buffalo might be looking to. But I couldn't agree with you more. You just need to be patient with these two guys. Don't take the Tyler Myers route where you bring them into the NHL right away. Let them marinate, wherever they're playing next year. Let them develop. I'm personally pretty excited about our next pick, David Podkowski, because he had all the right things to say in his interviews, especially after being drafted. I think Buffalo really latched onto him as a guy that might represent the blue and gold pretty well. I think one of the questions you have on with this team is the ability to stand up for your teammates, and I think. Something that's been in question with the Sabres the past couple of years, but with a guy like David, doesn't seem you're ever gonna have to question that in him. The guy plays like a freight train out there.
Yeah, really physical player. Obviously has the size. Another right shot defenseman. Plays a heavy game and is a heavy player. And I think you need guys like that increasingly in the NHL. It's always been important, but I think now teams have said, we need to have that plus, whatever mobility and everything else. What you're not going to get out of Bedkowski is a lot of points, which I mean is fine. That's not what you're looking for. I think you're trying to see, is he going to take a step? Is he going to be a guy that in the next couple of years is gonna show enough to be more than a physical shutdown defenseman? I think he probably is what he is. He's probably a 5'6" defenseman at this point. Maybe if everything goes right, maybe you'll get a top 4 guy out of him. But what you're going to get is a guy that's going to hit people and he'll drop the gloves when he needs to, and he'll do the things that have to be done. And I think that you need more players with identity. A lot of the guys that you mentioned, Rosén and Helenius and Ostlund and all of them, what is the issue with those players? And that's, the issue is that they're not very big, they don't, Benson, they haven't drafted size. And then we see Buffalo almost shift completely with their first 2 picks this year and getting 2 guys of massive size. And then in Bedkowski, you get Murtka, who doesn't have that physical edge, and then you get Bedkowski, who does. Well, guess what? That helps. Not everybody has to be the big, mean defenseman. You can have 1 or 2 or 3 of those guys. So I'm intrigued by Bedkowski in general. He didn't play the full season, so you want to see exactly where he's going to be starting out next year. But I mean, to get a player, a 6'5" right shot defenseman in 71st overall, you're feeling pretty good about the value that you get there. I think that there's enough upside in terms of a player with that athletic toolkit and physical profile to do something more. He did go on that long playoff run with Oshawa the year before, and then he came back, and obviously he's been with Owen Sound now. So I think that, having a guy with that kind of identity is always something you want to see within your team.
Now, I can't remember if you mentioned before, where did you have him ranked, like, for you, where you thought he would go compared to where he ended up going in the third round?
Yeah, I did not have him ranked.
You did not have him ranked?
I did not. He was not my top 100. I was probably in the minority, but players with that profile, I feel like there are like so many of them within the same draft. So, but yeah, he was not on my list this year.
I do feel like in this draft too, like a lot of GMs stayed away from the smaller defensemen. They really, went towards the size quite a bit.
They did, and actually, like this year, based on measurements that the league put in for the players for the draft, there was not one defenseman this year under 6 foot that was drafted. Not one.
Not one.
Which
and you look at guys like Lane Hudson, who won
the that's the thing. You have a guy, Lane Hudson wins the Calder Trophy, and the thing was, like, there weren't actually a lot of guys like that this year. There will be a couple next year. There are a couple of the top guys are actually under 6 foot next year, and so we'll see exactly how that goes. And it may have just been weird, but this was a big draft. Like, size was everywhere in this draft. I don't know if all of those big guys have the talent to match, the size and what you would get, certainly not of a Lane Hudson, but those are the things where, I think there's a lot to be, kind of sorted out. But, guys like Bedkowski and others, there were a lot of guys, like there are a couple other guys that went ahead of Bedkowski in the second and earlier in the third round that had even a lower offensive profile. So that's kind of one of the other things that's interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like you could definitely tell there was a trend too. And I know Jerry Fortin mentioned it, like after in their presser after the draft, but like they were kind of gearing their picks towards players that fit that mold of a playoff hockey team, size, grit, just a real snarl to their game. And again, maybe not every single pick they made, like Murka, he doesn't play with a lot of snarl, but like, there definitely was a trend in that direction. I will say that. And this was a draft that we haven't really seen from Buffalo in the past, because they've been kind of criticized for always going after smaller forwards and, not guys with a lot of size and whatnot.
Yeah, which isn't necessary. It isn't a problem in itself. You need to have more variety. And like the other thing too is, Murka might not have snarl, but that size does matter. The amount of ice that he takes up, the amount of the stick, his defensive stick, his ability, his reach, the different things. There are just some things that, yes, physically, that matters. Because it's not like like we could say like Zach Benson is short, but he is super competitive and he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder and he's going to get after it. And, I remember in his draft year, I was like, this might be the most competitive player in the draft. Having that compete is really the separating factor. And I think when you look at the guys that they drafted, there was a lot of that in there. You get that premium, flashy, more, kind of fluid skater in Murka, but then you get that snarl and that grit and that grime that you get from a Bedkowski. And you kind of go down the list and it's like, yeah, there are going to be some other guys that kind of play in that, play in the mud a little bit. And that'll help.
Yeah, I love that too. And get back to Murka for a second. Like, nobody needs you to go out there and throw your body around the way like Chris Pronger, Scott Stevens did as bigger defensemen. All you're asking of the guys of this size is to play like you're 6'6", right? Like when you're that much bigger than the guy next to you in front of your own net, just enforce your will on them. Get them out of the way. Like there's one thing in the game you can't teach is size. And if you're standing next to somebody who's 6 foot or 5'11" and they're manhandling you in front of the net and you're 6'6", 250 pounds, you got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and playing big, being disruptive, making things more difficult on the other team. There's lots of different ways to do that. And so
Correct.
you do. And I think for as far as the Sabres are concerned, in terms of how they've been building their roster, you just have to find other ways to balance that. If you are going to have a number of, smaller forwards, how do you support them with some bigger guys that also can still play? Obviously, you look at the rest, you say, oh, well, Tage Thompson is not small. So like you've got other players that kind of fit in that range. So I mean, there's plenty of different ways to build the team.
Couldn't agree with you more. Let's get to the Sabres' third pick, who was a I believe it was a center. And I'm sorry if I'm butchering this name, Matos Jan Kushrik, out of Slavia Praha with Czechia. What can you tell us about him? I remember trying to look up a lot of his. There wasn't a ton on him, but again, they kind of went right-handed defenseman, center, not center heavy, but they definitely had a target. What they were targeting in this draft. Their two biggest weaknesses, in my opinion, which is down the middle on the right-hand defense.
Yeah, so Kuharchik is a guy that I have seen. He was not on my list. But I have seen him live. He played at the under-18 Worlds for the Czechs this year. He was born in Italy, and he was just taken today. I forget by who in the import draft to go to the CHL if he so chooses. It's always difficult. These guys that play, and Murtka was playing in the Czech league before. Kuharchik was playing in their U20 league, which is, not a great league. And then did play in their second division of their pro league as well. He's got size. I think he has two-way ability, not a ton of offensive skill in terms of he's not going to be a guy that makes you miss. I think when he was younger in Czech, he did have a little bit more of that pop. But 1 point over 10 international games in either the Hlinka Gretzky or the under-18 World Championship, 4 points in 20 games at the pro level. Not bad, actually, in Czech, but under a point per game in their U20 league, and then did decently well in their playoffs. So, these are just some of the counting stats, but he played more of a bottom six role on the under-18 Worlds team. Is there a ton of upside there? Is he going to be a player? I don't know. I think that's the thing, is where you have these mid-round picks. Really, part of this, the story of the Sabres draft is you have number 9 super premium, but no second rounders where there was plenty of value to be had. You use a third rounder with a lower upside, lower skill in terms of offense, but a need in a right shot defenseman. And now, as you get to the fourth round, you're trying to find players, and you're looking for types of players. And I think having a guy that's more of a two-way, grinded out kind of forward, that can help you as you go forward. But there was really never a time where I saw the player and got super excited about him. But it was also not, as I'm drilling down the top 100 players, players like Kuharchik was. They were really never going to be in that mix anyway. So that's kind of part of it. So I think with any of these mid-round picks, you're always saying, all right, well, let's hope, let's see what happens. And maybe we'll get lucky here.
Yeah. And you mentioned you didn't have him in your top 100, but I think Buffalo probably drafts this kid because he sees him probably as more of a bottom 6 guy to begin with. Right.
Right.
They're hopeful that's where he projects. And not every guy you're taking forward to defenseman, you're hoping can be, a top level guy for you. But I definitely feel like, given his size and what you just said about him, he's probably going to project, if he does make it to the NHL as a consistent player, probably in your bottom 6, maybe in a bottom line guy.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. If you can get an NHL player out of a 4th round pick, that's typically a win. So that's that's the thing. And it doesn't matter what role they play. If he's a player, even if you're signing him to a contract, you feel like you had a win there.
Agreed. Then we get to the first of 2 goalies Buffalo took. Actually, I got to check him out a little bit. at the first day of development camp this past Monday is Samuel Miloch. Again, sorry,
Maloche. Yeah.
Maloche. Okay.
Mhm.
Sorry if I'm butchering the name, but
That's all right.
he looked pretty. He looked pretty good in my opinion. He has a filthy setup, no doubt about it. Loved his setup, very Devin Levi-esque from when Devin was with Northeastern. But out of the QMJHL with the again, I'm going to butcher this.
Ruin Noranda.
Noranda Huskies. Not a bad record. Numbers, I mean, 30, 14, and 6, five goose eggs, and then just kind of a subpar 900 save percentage. What can you tell us about him? Because I kind of liked what I saw in the limited amount of time I got to watch him at development camp. But again, you take that with a grain of salt. It's the first day. You're not really – players aren't probably killing themselves. And it just came after, 30 minutes of skating.
Yeah, so actually, like a 900 save percentage in the queue, not bad. Like, I mean, especially it's not bad, and it's especially not bad because this was his first full season of junior hockey. So that's another thing. He prior to the season, he played in one game in the QMJHL. So I actually think this is an interesting pick, and I liked it. Not a goalie, like I didn't rank a ton of goalies this year. The guys that I had were a bit different. He is a 6'2" goalie with, a guy that he played 50 plus games this year in the queue. He'll play probably 50 plus more next year. And, coming up through the ranks, was a top guy, with his, in his age group in terms of playing, getting opportunities, but he's also fairly young. July birth date, so he's still 17. So you've got that on your side as well. Is he going to be, I mean, Devin Levi was a 7th round pick. This guy's a 4th round pick. A lot of goalies in the 4th round. I think it was smart for the Sabres to kind of see who was left, because I think some of the goalie, like the first goalie went 20th overall this year, and I'm still not entirely sure about that pick. That's a 6-foot goalie. And as we know, size tends to matter a lot more with goalies. But I think for Milosh, it's just going to be, anytime you're drafting a goalie, there's a lot of hope involved. And I think that's the case here as well. Is he going to be an NHL goalie? It's really tough to tell. We'll probably not know for another 6 years. So I don't think it's, he's not a guy that you're going to see soon. But I think because of how well he performed as a first-year QMJHL player this year, that's one of the reasons why this was a pick where I was like, okay, I see. I think that's interesting. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, and like, what's the narrative around goalies, right? When you draft it, goalies are weird, their development's weird. Like, I kind of tend to agree. It takes us a little bit longer to really get. I mean, I don't know, but like in terms of, I can't speak for experience, but to learn the pro game. You have Devin Levi going into, he played like half a season in the AHL. Then this was his first full year in the AHL. Probably going to be starting the next year in Rochester unless he has an incredible camp and beats out UPL for that backup spot behind Alex. I personally think Alex Lyons your starter next year, given the year that UPL had. That's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but I think there is definitely going to be a competition for the backup spot in Buffalo this year. Maybe he beats out UPL for, I don't know, but I'm totally on board with development when it comes to goaltenders in Rochester, and like given the year that Levi had last season. I mean,
yeah,
let him go chase a Calder Cup. You know what I mean? Like, let him go do that. I thought they had a good shot at this year. Some of their NHL players they sent down didn't really perform in the second round against Laval. But I couldn't agree with you more. Next player, now a left-handed defenseman, Noah LeBerg. I'm pronouncing that right?
I think.
LeBerg. Yeah. I should have started. Yeah, I got the end of the last name is where I'm really getting it wrong. But for another QMJHL player, 6'1", 190 pounds. What can you tell us about LeBerge? Again, going defense heavy. Not as big as the previous two defensemen, but still more offensive upside to his game, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge book on him. I'll be honest with you. I don't have a ton on him. You know, wasn't in the mix to be ranked for my list. But at the same time, you know, like I think that the players at this range, it's, you know, you're looking for types, you're looking for different things. I think he's a competitor. You know, the bit that I did see of him, I think there's some good hockey sense there. I think that, you know, he's got some maturity to his game, decent size, not huge, but decent. You know, and I think he's got a little bit of, you know, compete to him, which I like to see. You know, pretty decent numbers this year in terms of his production. Nothing super exciting. I think in the QMJHL, especially for a second-year player, maybe would have wanted to see a little bit more point production, but Acadie Bathurst was not a great team. You know, so I think now they'll be the Newfoundland Regiment. So that's a whole new change too for those players. I don't know, like, I don't know how many people are familiar with Newfoundland, but it's not close to anything. You know, so it is going to be a very different challenge for the players there. The same Acadie Bathurst is not near anything either. So, you know, like that's it probably will feel a little different there. Newfoundland loves their hockey, so I'm sure they're going to have some real good crowds and things like that. But this is another player where it's just like, hey, let's see where it goes. He's got, you know, he fits the type, obviously a left shot defenseman. At this point, you're just going down your list. Who is the next guy? He was the next guy. And now you have a chance. And will he be anything? You know, like I said, I don't have a strong enough book to tell you that I have great confidence in where he's going to be in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot on him either when I was trying to kind of, you know, looking into at the draft class as it went on. Again, maybe just you're kind of throwing at a dart at a board there, hoping that, you know, he projects to guess where you had him on your board.
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing that's always important to remember is that, you know, obviously I'm you know, by myself doing this job by myself, whereas these teams have all their area scouts. You know, the reason that we're more of a, you know, kind of a measuring stick as opposed to the full picture, right? Because it's one of the things that that I think will be, you know, like the important thing is to know is that the scouts put in such tremendous work all throughout the year, and you might not like the picks, but the methodology and you know, those are the things that there are a lot of things that are without beyond a scouting director or an area scout's control that happens with how the board falls. But, you know, you build your list the best that you can, and you hope that, you know, the players that you really want are going to be there. And, you know, this is a guy that they obviously, you know, had in a high enough range. I think if you look at some of the other public rankings, like he was decently high on NHL Central Scouting. He was decently high in some of these other, you know, in terms of he probably went after where some of those lists would have had him go. You know, but I do think that the scouts, the work that they put in, I'll never be a one-to-one replacement for the work that a staff of 7 or 8 people or 9 or 10 or 12, you know, however many the scouts plus crossover guys and assistant GMs and, you know, Jerry Fortin and everybody else getting looks at these guys.
Well, you know what, too, I don't think you give yourself enough credit, man, because when you talk about, you know, the job you do, you know, you're near the top of the list of people who refer to. So I give you a lot of credit. That's why you're always the guy I want to have on the show, personally.
I appreciate it.
We'll wrap up here real quick with the final 3 picks. Buffalo's next pick was a center, you know, plays right wing as well. He's committed to going to the University of North Dakota. Played last season with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. Ashton Schultz. Finally get a last name right. Let's go.
Yeah, that one was easy. Yeah. So, you know, I think with Schultz, he's a late 2006. So, you know, he's a little bit ahead of these guys in terms of that year of development. Those late birth date guys are always, you know, a little bit different. You know, James Higgins was a late birth date guy. Porter Martone was a late birth date guy. So, you know, those players are they have this kind of leg up. What we saw from Ashton Schultz last year he or this year, this was his first full year of junior hockey. He did play in Minnesota high school hockey. He was a very good Minnesota high school hockey player at Minnetonka High School, which was a great program while he was there. Made the transition, was playing for the Sioux Falls Stampede, ends up getting traded to Chicago, and then had a really nice season in a year where Chicago was not good. It's been rare that the Chicago Steel have not been good. They were terrible this year. He was among the brighter spots on a bad team. And so I think that is a positive. They didn't make the playoffs this year. It was a rough ride, but this is a guy headed to the University of North Dakota, a place that has been a factory for pro players. They make you play a certain way, which is, you got to have some two-way ability, which he has. He's got to, he has to get harder. He's got to get tougher, those different things. We'll see ultimately. I assume that he's on track to go there next year. Otherwise, he would have to do another year of junior because, this new CHL rule has created a bit of a structure where players might get pushed back. But this is a guy that I think, he's one of those mid-round picks that you say, hey, we don't even have to think about this guy for 3 years. And that's basically what you're going to be doing. You're going to say, we got 3 years until we have to sign him. Really 4 if we want him to let him play out the entire string. He would have the option to go free agent after that. But with a 6th round pick, I think you're just saying, all right, hey, go play at college. We'll come, we'll continue to check in on you. We'll make sure development's going well. But you really don't have to. These 6th and 7th round picks are not players that you're going to have to think about until, it comes time to possibly sign them.
Okay. I like that answer a lot. Again, usually late round picks are guys that, you don't really, you hope they even make it to the NHL or, project to make the NHL. And hearing about the good season he had, and I love the new rule with the CHL and the college hockey. I think it's going to be exciting, especially for guys like you. We'll get to their next pick, Melvin Novotny, out of. I apologize. I don't believe any relation to Yuri Novotny, former Sabre. Maybe there is. I don't know.
Correct. No.
No, I'm pretty sure there's no relation. I think.
So he's a Swedish national player with a Czech name. So played for Leksands last year, primarily in their U20. Did play at the under 18 Worlds with them. So I've seen him live multiple times this year. He is signed to go play in the USHL next season with the Muskegon Lumberjacks, which they've been a place where they've gotten a lot of those import players. They've done a really good job with them. They've gotten them prepared for the next round. What I'd say with Novotny is there were flashes last year where you could say, okay, well, I could see a little bit of skill. I could see a little bit of some of this hockey sense, and maybe there's, maybe if he could dial up the compete a little bit, he's going to have a little bit of a better time. But he did play a regular role with that team. He was a little bit down the lineup. He was kind of their 4th line guy. Didn't play a ton for that team, but was given opportunities. And then, for Novotny, again, 7th round picks. It's a Hail Mary. It's a prayer. It's really nothing that you can say, oh, well, he's definitely going to make it. But he's got decent enough size. He's, was a true U18 last year. And he's now going to have a chance to get used to North American hockey. We'll see if this is a prelude to him potentially going to college, potentially going to the CHL, whatever. But going with the Muskegon Lumberjacks, a place where they have developed an awful lot of their import players and have helped them get better, I think it's it's a good chance for him to go take that next step because he was close to a point per game in Sweden's U20 league, which is great, but I think the USHL is a totally different world compared to that league.
Yeah, I mean, like especially when you're playing in leagues like that over in Europe, I mean, competing at the level he did, or at least the way you make it sound, like maybe he is a guy that if drafted a year later might be higher up on the board.
Yeah. I mean, some of these guys that are in the 7th round probably wish they got passed over so they could be 4th and 5th round picks as reentries, exactly. But you never know, and that, so, but he'll be one to watch because he is going to the USHL and it'll be a different experience for him.
Awesome. Okay. And then we get to their final pick, the second goalie they took in 2025, Yevgeny Prokhorov. Did I get that one right?
That I believe you did. I believe you did. And when we get into the Belarusian names, then it becomes a little bit different, a little bit harder. But obviously with Belarus, also like Russia, banned from international competition, so we don't see these guys in international. Have not seen him live. Have not seen him really at all. In terms of the numbers that he had, he's got the size profile. The Belarusian goalies, similar to the Russian goalies that we've seen more of them kind of start to filter in. Latvian goalies as well. Both the U.S. and Canada have not produced as many as some of these other European nations. But he played in Bobrusk, Belarus in the MHL. And so I've actually been to Bobrusk, Belarus, which is kind of funny that he came from here. I haven't seen too many guys, but he also was picked up in the CHL, the import draft. So we'll see if he comes to North America, which I think would be a good thing. The thing about the guys that do play in the MHL, they kind of can get messed around because they're moving teams and stuff, and like sometimes they got called up to the KHL or the VHL or wherever. He's a player that I think would potentially benefit from coming over to North America, getting an opportunity. I'm just trying to figure out exactly who drafted him today, because I know I saw him. And there it is. Yeah, he got drafted by the Flint Firebirds. So there's a chance that he could play in the OHL next year. We'll see if he comes over. I'm not sure what his contract status is. That's always difficult. It looks like he might have a contract for a couple more years. So, So, I mean, that's another one. Hope and a prayer, but yet another big goalie, and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, goalies are kind of like a long shot, but you mentioned it's difficult kind of to scout a player like him, given like obviously being banned in certain tournaments and whatnot with the political climate of the world. I actually lied. There was one last pick, Ryan Rusinski, out of the USHL. Your thoughts on him before we let you get out of here?
Yeah, I thought he had a really nice season with Youngstown. He played well. He had 42 points this year. Not a big guy. On the college track, supposed to be going to Ohio State next year. I think that he's got some compete to him. I think there's good enough skill, not high end. I think at his size, there needs to be a more dynamic element for him to really have a chance, or you have to be just a super competitor. I don't know that he's necessarily in either of those categories yet, but that's another guy. Let him go to college. Maybe you sign him, maybe you don't. But worth a shot, because I think, finding guys that have produced, upwards of 40 points in the USHL, which is not a very easy league to produce at that level in, especially if you're an undersized guy, is, that's good. He is a late 06. So again, he's another one of those guys where, age isn't necessarily on his side either. But it's a chance for him to prove himself. So I think those guys, you're looking for guys that have that chip on their shoulder. I think he plays that way a little bit. And if he continues that in college, then that'll serve him well. And then you'll see maybe he could be a depth guy down the road.
Yeah. And again, like, he got a solid year in in the USHL, a very good league. And he's going to go to a great program in Ohio State and see, how he progresses and develops there at that level. Chris, one last thing before we let you go. This is the draft of Gavin McKenna. Lot of talk about him being. I mean, where do you rank him? I mean, we've seen the highlight reels. We've seen how good he is. Has he committed to going to college yet? Has he chosen a school?
So he hasn't chosen a school. It sounds like, while he hasn't said it publicly, he's down to two schools. Michigan State and Penn State are the two schools that are in the mix now. Obviously close ties with Terry Pegula to Penn State.
Yeah.
And I do believe that Terry is involved in helping make sure that the NIL package, I don't have proof of this, but they are the school that's offering the biggest NIL package, which I don't think will be the deciding factor. But yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see. In terms of how good he is, I think I'd probably put him behind Celebrini and Bedard in terms of where he's at now. He is a wing, which I think is a separator between both those guys are centers. But I think that we're talking like you look at guys like Jack Hughes and others, like he's in that kind of similar category. Probably would be third to fourth best first overall pick in the last several years here. Going back to 2019 and he's a player that I think will be really exciting. We haven't seen a number one pick as a wing since Lafreniere. I'm sorry, Slavkovsky was also a wing. So, we've seen it where top guys have been wings. But the thing is that what he did in the last 2 years at the WHL was absurd. He had a 54 game point streak this year. I mean, he is an absolutely phenomenal player. He's fast, he's skilled, he's smart. He's got, highlight reel plays going everywhere. He needs the challenge, I think, of what college will bring, and it won't be easy. I do think he'll probably be one of the best players in the country, but whether he goes to Michigan State or Penn State, I think it really is irrelevant. He'll still be the number one pick. It's just a matter of what sets him up for the best to get to the NHL the following season. That's going to be the ultimate decision. So I do think that there's a lot to this thing, and it's going to be fun to follow. College hockey is going to be great to follow this year. Junior hockey is going to have a lot of great talent as well. So we're going to have a lot to watch in this 2026 draft. I will say the top end, similarly like this year, the top end was fine in this draft. It's when you get to those next tiers, and I feel like next year, at least what we've seen very, very early on, very similar in terms of the drop off happens sooner. We'll see where we're at as we move along in the season, but anybody saying like 2026 was for sure better than 2025, I think it's too early to say.
Okay. Like I said, I've enjoyed watching his highlight reels. And, you hear the things like hashtag tank for McKenna already here in Buffalo.
I know. Yeah.
What would he have to do wherever he decides to play to put him above the Celebrini and the Bedard? Like, what type of a season would he have to have at the college level? Like, is he going to have one of those Jack Eichel level seasons? Or Boston,
yeah. I mean, like, he'd have to have like a Celebrini level season. Celebrini was as good as Eichel's, and so those two guys, like, basically, 75-point season would maybe change the conversation to a certain extent about where he's at. But I think the fact is that he's never going to be as well-rounded a player as Macklin Celebrini is. He's not going to have the goal scoring that Connor Bedard does. He might be the better playmaker of either of those two guys. So like, that's the thing, is he's not as complete, or maybe doesn't have the premium thing that you have, but he's clearly a special player. He will be a star in the NHL. He will be a guy that makes a significant difference for whoever drafts him. And yes, I mean, like, I think teams will not so act, they won't say it, but I think there will be some teams that are not too sad about the losses that as they pile up next year.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Chris, thanks for coming on with us and giving us the time as always. Where can people find all of your content, and where can people snag one of those? I'm a big hat guy. That's beautiful. I love that logo, man. I'm a big
I'm a big. I just got this hat at the draft, thankfully. I don't think we have a store yet. We have like Flow racing gear. We don't have any FloHockey gear yet. So we got to get on that. But yes, I've actually heard that quite a bit. People like the hats. I like this hat a lot. This is brand new. It's nice because my other one was just full of sweat stains. So this is a good one. But everything is over at FloHockey.tv. We did full draft grades and everything for each class. We did. You could look at our rankings. I did a way too early 2026 ranking for a top 10. And then obviously we also are the streaming home of the Rochester Americans. So that, we have the AHL on that platform. We just announced earlier in the spring that we have the QMJHL coming on board next season. Hoping to have some more announcements soon about some other leagues that will be joining up. Really excited about, the future at FloHockey. We've been doing a lot of things that hopefully fans are really going to like, and we're only just getting started. So FloHockey.tv is the best place to find all of my stuff. And then at Chris M. Peters on Twitter and, wherever else you've want to find.
I appreciate you still call it. I appreciate you still call it Twitter too.
I can't bring myself to call it X.
I can't either. No way. Chris, it's been a pleasure, man. And like Chris said, make sure you subscribe to Flow TV, FloHockey TV. I did to watch Devin Levi and the Rochester Americans try and make a push for the Calder this year. They have some great coverage over there. You can just about any game you're looking for. Thanks again, Chris. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, Duane, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, bud.
That was Chris Peters from FloHockey. We're going to continue on here for a few more minutes, giving you some of my thoughts on the past 48 hours with the Buffalo Sabres. It's been especially last 24 hours, the start of free agency, the moves the Sabres made, which we'll bring those up here in a second. If you are a Sabres fan and you are pissed off with the current direction of the team, yeah, man, I don't blame you. I'm pissed. I'm pissed that we're going to go through this again. And I shared my thoughts earlier on Twitter after the media scrum with Kevin Adams that they sneakily tried to avoid making public streaming live. And then I don't know, man. It was just a really soft move from the organization. 24 hours removed from, you announced that you've let go a guy who worked for the organization for over 35 years producing Sabres hockey, because the rumor was that the broadcast was too critical of the team. You're a 14-year playoff drought. Don't think you're critical enough. I'm surprised Rob Ray wasn't swearing live on TV, for non getting hit in the head with a puck reasons. I think this is a sign that we're going to have to start talking about the former first-round picks we just got done talking about for a second with Chris. You got your Isaac Rosine, your Yuri Kulik, your Noah Austin, and maybe even Costa Helenius, your Ryan Johnsons, who, just signed his extension. I think you're going to have to start talking about those players as being guys that might be on this roster next year to start the year. I mean, obviously Kulik is on this team, no doubt about it. I mean, he went the right path in terms of development. Rosen has been in Rochester now for a couple of seasons. And here's the thing that kind of, irks me about these players. They're all undersized. I think except for Costa Helenius. I want to say it was Olli Jokinen maybe was the one who was really high on him, said that he could play in the NHL next year after he was drafted. I think in terms of players that maybe you have a little higher projection for, he might be at the top. Rosen, this is really a make or break year for him. If he wants to play in the NHL with the Buffalo Sabres, this has to be the year, right? They made no moves from a top 6 forward perspective. They made some moves that for guys that may not even be on the roster this year. I'll bring them up real quick momentarily, but it's I don't know, man. I'm not trying to sit here and get overreact already on what this team could look like, and if we're staring down the barrel of a 15-year playoff drought. But right now, after the Alex Lyon signing, I'm fine with that. I think he probably projects to be your starting goalie next year. He had a better year than UPL. 900 save percentage, or just about close to a 900 save percentage, below three goals against average. He's a veteran. It's kind of like the same mold, just younger, of what you've been doing the past couple of years with guys like Craig Anderson and James Reimer. You signed Zach Jones, Zach Metza, and Carson Meyer to 2-way deals, guys that are probably Zach Jones might push for a spot, compete for a spot in the NHL on the blue line. But these are guys that are all going to probably play in Rochester. Riley Fiddler-Schultz, another guy, probably, Rochester. Yeah, you have guys like bottom 6, like Justin Danforth, who signed a 2-year, $3.6 million contract, who's going to, fight for a spot in your bottom 6. I don't know, man. You maybe now you're putting more stock and more hope into Josh Doan, as being a guy that's gonna, hopefully, be the player that, when Arizona drafted him, that they projected him to be. I know he had 19 points last season and 50 some odd games. You extended Ryan McLeod to personally a great deal. They go like 4 years, $5 million a year, which is very, very well deserved. I don't know. It's hard for me to get excited about this hockey team, and people there in the chat. I see your comments. I know I didn't really get to a lot of them because we were really in the thick of things with Chris Peters from FloHockey, but it's really difficult to get excited about this hockey team because you're essentially running back the same forwards minus, JJ Peterka. They signed Jack Rathbone to a 2-year deal. I'm assuming that's a 2-way contract. Ryan Johnson again got the 3-year contract. Tyson Kozak got a 3-year deal. Ryan McLeod 4-year deal. Jack Quinn 2-year deal. Transactions that went through. There was the one player, the fighter. Gearston. Sabres signed forward Mason Gearston to a 2-year, 2-way contract worth an average annual AAV of $775,000. 30-year-old had played 25 games, has 25 total games of NHL experience. Played a lot with Utica last year, and all with Utica and / the Devils. Gearston had 5 assists in 31 games last season with the Henderson Silver Knights, the Vegas AHL affiliate, while playing primarily on defense. He's played 447 AHL games. And I think we all saw the highlights too. The guy can chuck them, no doubt about it. Maybe that's the most valuable thing that Buffalo sees it in. I don't really know. I'm pissed. It's hard for me to get overly vocal about it because we've been here too many times before, and you just feel like you're yelling into a void. Same shit into a void of we're doing this again. We're fucking doing this again. We're putting all our eggs in the Jack Quinn basket for the 3rd offseason in a row. I don't know what he did in anybody's eyes to deserve a raise. Maybe they're just trying to give guys, overpay guys they already have, because you didn't have to pay him the contract you paid him, in my opinion. I mean, what did he do that screamed, let's give that guy a raise? What did he do? I don't get it. What did Jack Quinn do to deserve a raise other than be hurt and underperform and very underwhelmed? Are you just trying to overpay certain players because you're trying to get to the cap, spend to the cap, saying, hey, look, we spent to the cap this year and it still didn't work? And you have Kevin Adams like a dipshit going on. I shouldn't say that about him. Sorry. Saying to the media that, they will match anything for Bowen Byram offer sheet wise, and they've spent, and the moves they've made this offseason so far is in preparation to a Bowen Byram offer sheet. I think they have mishandled the Bowen Byram situation as badly as you could, in my opinion. I don't think they ever should have made the 9th overall pick. Again, I don't know what deals were there to be made. As much as I love Michael Kesselring and maybe the potential of Josh Stone, they didn't get the value of JJ Peterka, no doubt about it. I mean, I don't know. What are you going to get? Are you going to sign Bowen Byram? Is that what's going to happen here? Because we're all expecting maybe a forward to come out of this, right? I mean, maybe Kevin is sticking to his guns and he has a value for Bowen Byram that he wants. And maybe, from what it sounds, he wants a forward and a defenseman. I mean, if you're getting both those guys, are you getting a bona fide top 6 forward? Or, you know what I mean? Are you looking for another right-handed shot defenseman, a guy you already had in Bernard Docker, which, again, I still don't buy into his bullshit reasons as to why he didn't sign him. You have plenty of cap space. It's not like he played poorly. I thought he performed pretty well, given the positions he was put in after the Cousins trade. I thought that he looked okay. Like, he definitely looked like he could have taken a spot on this roster over Jacob fucking Bryson. A position that you value, a right-handed shot defenseman, and you just let him walk away for nothing. I personally don't get it. I don't get it. Why you would let that guy just walk out the door for nothing. And now we're still going to be searching for another right-handed shot defenseman. Unless, again, you get something back in a Bowen Byram deal, because you're all indications point that you want a forward and a defenseman, probably a right-handed shot defenseman, which you already had there. But you already had him. He was there. It's going to cost you peanuts. And I look at what you signed. He would have had the most NHL experience. I don't know, man. It's going to be another long, miserable offseason. I'm over it, man. 25 years old. He's 6'1", not massive, but a right-handed shot defenseman. Just let him walk out the door for nothing over some really, his arbitration rights, what it would have cost. Oh yeah, it says it would have cost us against the cap, but when he goes to arbitration, I think that's what the reasoning was. Kevin Adams said, if he would have went to arbitration, the value they would have had him at was much higher than just sign the guy. Then just sign him. Sign him to a 2-year deal for $1 million a year. Is he saying no to that? $1.25 million? Is he saying no to that? I don't know. It's going to cost you nearly nothing against your cap. You know what I mean? You're so far underneath the cap still. I'll pull up some comments here from Tim. Thanks for joining, Tim. New to the chat. I'm assuming you're a new subscriber. Thanks for hopping in. Shout out to you. From John Park, Josh Doan will be the first or second line after camp. Mark my words, they think he's a direct top 6 replacement. I mean, maybe he is. Hopefully we're all wrong about him and he ends up filling that void. I don't know. I think those are the baskets they're putting all their eggs in. Are the JJ Quinn, or I'm sorry, Jack Quinn. Yeah, it's called J. Finally bouncing back for good this time. You know what I mean? Not getting injured again and not underwhelming and underperforming and just looking like he's just not strong enough, just like he was when he did play last season. Not being inconsistent. And maybe Josh Doan is that guy. I know he plays a heavier game, and maybe he surprises a lot of us. I hope. I genuinely hope. I don't know. But I won't be shocked if we do lose him for nothing. I'm not sure who you're referring to. Tim, sorry. From Mikey C, they're tanking. They just started admitting it. Welcome to the ice, your Austin Sabres. Misery for McKenna. That could be a new hashtag. Why not? At this rate, we'll be out of the playoffs for the 15th year in a row. This is not going to cut it. I agree. Couldn't agree with you more. More from John. When does the media start getting really loud? I mean, they've been loud. I mean, outside of just media directly affiliated with the Sabres, I think we've all been pretty loud. Your podcasters, your writers, your spit and chicklets. They've all been pretty loud, to say the least, about how bad and how miserable this team is. And listen, it's in my DNA, as negative as I can be about this franchise. And I don't want to be negative about it. And I'll be the first to say, from a podcasting standpoint, and this is true, when the team stinks, when they get blown out, our post games, generally, when I look at the screen and see our numbers and how many people are watching, it's normally pretty higher than your normal everyday podcast, the Sabres podcast, when maybe they don't stink. But as a fan, I just want this team to be, respected around the league. I want players to want to come here. It's so tiring to sit here and have these same fucking conversations over and 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 over again. It's so exhausting. And here's a good comment. We are all 2018 Ryan O'Reilly. It's true, man. It's true. And I genuinely, I know that the talk about if this team is just dog shit again, going into Thanksgiving, that Kevin Adams, I don't even really believe that Kevin Adams will get fired. I just don't believe it. I do not believe it, man. What did we get Jarmo Kekalainen for if these are the moves you made? If these are the moves you made, then why did we bring Jarmo in? All the excitement around Jarmo Kekalainen, Michael Kessler and Josh Stone, is that the result? Not trading your 9th overall pick to make your roster now better? Is that the result? I mean, I'm not going to speculate anything, but was he just a guy to bring in to shut fans up about Kevin Adams and to deflect away from Kevin Adams? I don't know. But, I mean, if this is the offseason we're getting in year one with Jarmo Kekalainen, what do I have to be excited about? Or is this a year where they're maybe doing a soft reset? I don't know. I don't know. But if I'm Rasmus Dahlin, I'm Tage Thompson, and, I saw a comment on Twitter, the first domino to fall with all these players could be Alex Tuch. It really could be, man. I'm really, a couple weeks ago, I wasn't really all that worried. I wasn't really all that worried about losing Alex Tuch because I just think that you pay that guy whatever he wants and he'll stay. But this is the first time I've genuinely felt worried that we're not going to be able to, this might be our last year with Alex Tuch. And maybe Alex Tuch is going to say, I'm going to take Kevin's comments today that obviously he prioritized other things before Tuch. Come July 1st, when July 1st came, but it kind of sounds like to me that this might bleed into the offseason and possibly into the season. And maybe Alex sits back and I'm going to see how this team looks and weigh my options. And I don't want to give him that chance, man. I really, really don't. Because even good teams on paper, even if you had a good team on paper, maybe what the Rangers were expected to be this past season, could an injury could derail it. And I'd rather just get this figured out now with Alex Tuch. Because if he goes, man, I'm afraid those other two guys are going to be not too far behind him, asking for trades, asking out. And all the stuff we heard from guys like, Paul Bissonnette might come true. That, Dahlin is done zones, as he said it. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. We'll get into it more on the next episode of Two Goalies with Mike on Tuesday next week. Unless obviously something happens between now and then, we'll obviously go live and do a pop-in podcast. I don't know. So let's see here. From an hour ago, NHL Rumor Report, everyone's favorite current NHL Rumor Twitter page. And Chris Johnson, it could make sense in a world where the Flames find a way to move Rasmus Andersson. They're doing it in concert with making a trade to get Bowen Byram. Did I miss something while we've been live? Did something happen while I've been live? I don't think so, right? I feel like my phone would absolutely be going bonkers right now. Yeah, I don't think anything happened. No. And nothing new to really talk about when it comes to Bowen Byram at all. So, yeah, unless something happens with Bowen Byram, we'll talk to you guys next Tuesday. I just think it's hilarious that they tried to get away with not streaming that media scrum live today. Potentially could be the last time we hear from Kevin Adams for a long time. We're like, oh, we're not going to stream this live. And it wasn't until fans got really fucking vocal about it that that they made it public. You know, I think it started with the Audacity app, and now the Sabres tweeted it out a few hours ago. So I thought that tweet was hilarious. Kevin Adams addressed signing Ryan McLeod, options regarding Bowen Byram, talks about stock free agent acquisition more today, and they gave you a link. I was like, that tweet's hilarious. Because, you know, that shouldn't even be a thing. That should have been available to people hours and hours and hours before when he was live. Like you do everything else during this time. It's not like a random media scrum middle of the season where he's just addressing a few things and you can get away with that. No, this was a big deal. A lot of people had questions and he should have streamed it live, but they're hiding. It was kind of cowardly in my opinion. I don't think I'm overreacting when I say that either. But we'll talk to you guys later. Remember, this is brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from at 6 different Western New York locations. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a Fatty Beer. Let them know 2 goalies, 1 mic sent you. If you've enjoyed this episode, any past episodes, please make sure you're subscribed on wherever it is you listen to your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcasts, whether that's Spotify, you know, I don't know where else. Other than those 2, you can listen to podcasts. I mean, Google Podcasts. I don't know. Please make sure you subscribe. Leave us a good review. If you're watching on Facebook, like and share. Leave a comment. If you're watching on Twitter, like, repost, quote tweet, whatever you want to call it. Retweet, quote tweet. Leave a comment and make sure you're subscribed. You can find me at Duane S39. You can find the podcast at 2 Goalies with Mike. Most importantly, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that little bell icon so you're subscribed. You know when we go live for all your updates, Sabres related, NHL related. And most importantly, hit that like button. If you're watching right now on YouTube, hammer that like button. It does mean a lot with the algorithm. So hammer the like button, leave a comment, tell your friends. This has been episode 199, 2 Goalies, 1 Mike. Who will be our guest for episode 200 if we have one? I don't know. We'll see. We'll direct somebody, I think, hopefully. But until then, guys, we'll talk to you later. As always, go Sabres.